Greetings. This is the second video installment of the hypersymmetry regarding the solar eclipse cycle and significant earthquakes, and this time we'll be focused on Lisbon, Portugal and surrounding regions, which could see a very significant earthquake, potentially tsunami-genic, in this coming decade due to 4 solar eclipses that will be focused over this region. It is my intention with the creation of these videos to show the direct correlation between significant earthquakes into the solar eclipse. Here is an animation of the 1755 earthquake that struck Lisbon, Portugal. We're now looking a little bit more closely at this major event that occurred in 1755. It registered magnitude 9 and labelled the Great Lisbon Earthquake, as it produced a major tsunami felt right across the Atlantic. Just 2 years prior to this earthquake, we had a very interesting solar eclipse focus right over the region. Now, this is the main contention. Saros cycle 139 was attributed to this 1755 earthquake, and we see that occurring right through. The same Saros cycle and solar eclipse has registered many earthquakes over the region over the last few hundred years. The largest earthquakes in the region have the same symmetry, where the moon's shadow is either entering or exiting the eclipse. We note that the moon elongates and stretches at these points, which is an illusion, but it plays an interesting dynamic as to what's really taking place during an eclipse. The key is to visualise the moon itself either entering up through or down into the earth throughout the eclipse. This will give a new perception of what's taking place. The sun's light is being blocked ultimately during the eclipse, and the sun we must consider as being the primary time axis. Therefore, we are briefly losing information from the sun, and the signal from sun to earth is being temporarily blocked. We're now looking at the very large earthquakes that struck the region and their related hypersymmetry with the solar eclipse. In 1816, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck the region, having a solar eclipse the same year. 1858 also produced a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. This time the regions of Setúbal received this earthquake. 1909, we had a solar eclipse the previous year. 1908, with a magnitude 6 earthquake striking the region. 1722, a magnitude 7.8 Algarve earthquake struck. And then we moved to the Lisbon earthquake in 1755, having a very interesting hypersymmetry. It must be noted that the lunar cycle is 18 years, and every 3 of these cycles, or every 54 years, we get a completion of the Saros cycle, or the next step in movement of that branch. 1970 and 2024, we note a very similar hypersymmetry, or a continuation of the same eclipse. This is the main focus. Saros cycle 139 has been attributed to 3 major earthquakes in the region, and we get that again in 2024, where there's a high potential of another earthquake for the region. As we see, the 1970 and 2024 solar eclipses look almost identical. If we have a look at the earthquakes that struck back in 1970, we see an interesting symmetry. Not only do we get the 7.8 earthquake that struck offshore Portugal in 1969, a year prior to this solar eclipse, but we have an array of earthquakes, or a swarm of earthquakes, around Mexico and even around Nicaragua as well, the largest being 7.3 in Puerto Madero. So this is an interesting symmetry, and I've plotted this just to show the hypersymmetry between the earthquakes around the solar eclipse path, and also the entry and exit points are also featured as well. Now looking back at the 1969 magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck the Gulf of Cadiz, we note that the epicenter of this event very close to the magnitude 9 Great Lisbon earthquake that struck in 1755. We're now looking at an animation of the 1970 total solar eclipse and combined into the upcoming April 2024 total solar eclipse and their related symmetry, with key areas of emphasis focused upon the exit node or termination node of both of these eclipses and the hypersymmetry of a potential earthquake event that could be affecting the region in 2024. We're now comparing both solar eclipses and noting their exit points, and we note that the 1970 total solar eclipse is exiting just around the UK, just offshore, while the 2024 total solar eclipse is ending just further south towards Spain, which is a concern, which could mean that this earthquake upcoming could be a little bit more stronger than the 1969 earthquake in the Gulf of Cadiz. The main area of interest will be just west of the Strait of Gibraltar, the Azores-Gibraltar Transform Fault, and even further west in the Azores Triple Junction. These will be the main areas of watch for 2024, with a key emphasis being around the Gulf of Cadiz wedge due to the hypersymmetry from the 1969 earthquake. And I'm concerned that the areas and the most dangerous faults just slightly north could be affected, which may see a much larger event, as mentioned, due to 3 more solar eclipses coming from 2026 through 2028. The solar eclipse cycle is a fascinating study, and I highly recommend people look into this much more closely. The correlation of the 54-year cycle we can see in this image, 2023-2024, is correlated back into 1969-1970, and we note a hypersymmetry. If we look back, we see the next step in movement in 2023 and 2024. It's a fascinating study, the solar eclipse. I will be uploading a video regarding the New Madrid fault system and the solar eclipse cycle as well in 2024, so keep note of that. I found another direct correlation with two other earthquakes across the Azores Islands. We note in 1972 and 1998 solar eclipses, the Azores Islands experienced two earthquakes in November of 1973 and a 6.1 magnitude earthquake that struck in 1998, the same year of the solar eclipse, both sharing the same symmetry very close to the exit node or termination point of both solar eclipses. This video is focused upon Lisbon and the 1755 earthquake symmetry and the solar eclipse, but there are also two other earthquakes that struck in the Atlantic Ocean that produced tsunamis in the 1900s. Puerto Rico in 1918 and Grand Banks, Canada in 1929. Both had tsunamis with relatively moderately strong earthquakes, 7.3 magnitude in Puerto Rico and a 7.4 magnitude in Canada. We're now looking at both solar eclipses, 1918 and 1929, with both share a very interesting symmetry. The 1918 solar eclipse sees the moon termination just above the Puerto Rico Trench. Very interesting symmetry and a foreshadow of what was to come. We had a similar effect in 1929, this time the entry point of the moon coming out of the epicenter of the earthquake point that year, 1929. Very interesting correlation that is hardly a coincidence. In summary, the Saros cycle hypersymmetric earthquake correlation does indicate a potential large earthquake for 2024, and potentially the month of April looks to be the most significant, as it's coming a month after the supermoon in March, and also around the equinox period where there is a much larger potential for stronger earthquakes. So I'm concerned of a significant earthquake around the Lisbon region and other areas including Cape St. Vincent, the Gulf of Cadiz, Santarém district, Monte Santo, Algarve, Lisbon, and off the coast of Portugal and Galicia. These will be the main areas of watch for April 2024, but it will extend right through to 2024 and 2025. It is my hope that these videos will challenge any preconceptions of what's actually taking place during an eclipse. When solar eclipses come around the equinox periods, scientifically the Russell-McLaren effect tends to see a boost in solar translation and connectivity. During the months of March and September, Earth acts as a resistor, taking on more light from the Sun. As daylight are equal, equinox, hence the name. 40% more energy is injected within Earth's ionosphere just after equinox periods. The equinox is the time and date at which the Sun crosses the celestial equator when day and night are of equal length. So during and just after both equinox periods each year, the Earth receives 40% more light translation from the Sun. Alternatively, it means during an eclipse at this period of March, April, September, October, the Moon will block this solar transfer either totally or partially. This may explain the delay in manifestation of geophysical events that will always follow an eclipse of up to 3.5 years. Therefore, we can conclude that the Earth receives maximum solar input at equinox periods. The Earth misses solar information during eclipses, and this missing information may be missing 3D upgrades resulting in crustal deformation or a loss of Earth's mass. Some sort of 3D reset is taking place, and it's actually the earthquake event itself due to some sort of time-based discrepancy in Earth form, much like how the Sun rotates faster at the equator compared to the poles. This is an overlay of our 3D matrix that must reset itself to the new overlay. Looking further at significant earthquakes that occurred around the equinox periods in the months of March and April, we see 4 of the largest earthquakes ever recorded. Prince William Sound, Alaska in March 1964, magnitude 9.2. Magnitude 9 earthquake struck Sendai, Japan on March 2011. Rad Islands, Alaska in April 1965, magnitude 8.7. And Sumatra, Indonesia, March 2005, a magnitude 8.6, all shared the same symmetry, occurring around equinox period. We're now going to link some of these very large earthquakes with the solar eclipse. In 1952, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck near the Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia. We can see a solar eclipse occurring in 1950, just 2 years prior, with the direct overhead shadow of the moon very close to the epicenter of this event. We move to 1963, we get a similar occurrence. 1964, a magnitude 9.2 earthquake struck Alaska. We can see that the epicenter of this event also had a direct overhead signature of the moon, or the moon's shadow passing directly overhead. We can also attribute another earthquake to the very same solar eclipse in 1963, where the 1965 Rat Islands earthquake also had the same symmetry, with the moon's shadow directly overhead or very near the epicenter of this magnitude 8.7 earthquake in 1965. There are two annular solar eclipses in 2002 and 2005 which can be attributed to the Great Sumatran earthquake. We see an 8.6 magnitude earthquake struck in March of 2005, a follow-up from the December 26 earthquake that struck in 2004. And finally, we can also link in the Japan earthquake in 2011, where we had the same symmetry, with the solar eclipse occurring a year prior, and also on the same year we had a partial solar eclipse focus over the same region. Aside from the equinox being a pointer for a magnitude enhancement of earthquakes during the equinox period, we also have Jupiter's perihelion, which also factors in as an enhancement as well, as during the years of 52, 64 and 2011, Jupiter reached perihelion, and we did get magnitude 9 earthquakes in each of these occasions. Over the next 5 years, we have 4 solar eclipses focus over the same part of the world, which is a concern. Usually when we have a clustering of solar eclipses over a given region, we get a very significant earthquake event. And we do get this in 2026 through 2028, and that could be a sign of a megaquake occurring in the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, this is not to alarm people, but to forewarn that the solar eclipse information is indicating a potential major event towards the end of this decade, and we should see an activation in 2024 or 2025, which should show the signs or the early signs of a significant earthquake event for this region. And that concludes this video presentation. For more information, please visit solarwatcher.net and quakewatcher.com, where there'll be more information for members and subscribers, as well as website newsletters. Thanks for watching.